Oh, we're good. I'm getting the thumbs up, which I think means shut up and start doing the proper thing. Well, it was looking a very straightforward Spanish Grand Prix until suddenly it wasn't. A late safety car, thanks to Andrea Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes breaking down, led to a 6-lap sprint to the flag and lots of drama and chaos. Max Verstappen lost a likely podium and then perhaps his head, hitting George Russell at turn 5 and gave himself a 10-second penalty that dropped him to 10th place and opened up accusations that the world champion hit the Mercedes driver on purpose. So here to break down that incident and the small matter of McLaren, of course, taking a 1-2, led by Oscar Piastri, is our Autosport.com editor Haydn Cobb, and the man who's had a huge amount of trouble to get back from the show, Filip Cleeren. How are we doing, gents? We'll start with Phil, seeing as you were in situ. What was the atmosphere like after the race? Pretty interesting, I should imagine.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Definitely an eventful race. We always we always sort of slag of Barcelona as being boring, but actually it was a really interesting race, even without all the drama at the end. Thank you, Pirelli, for maybe not producing a good hard tyre, so nobody wanted to use it. But yeah, the atmosphere was pretty good. I mean, I caught a train back from Montmeló quite late with a lot of, shall I say, inebriated Max Verstappen fans that are all shouting and singing. So they were in fairly good spirits.
Had they left before the end of the race, is the question.
Yeah, it was after 10 p.m, so I don't know what they were doing over the past 7 hours. But
fair enough. Well, Haydn, you were on the news desk having to get all the chaos and various stories in. So how did you find it? It was a more interesting Spanish Grand Prix than we usually get, wasn't it, to be fair?
Yeah, definitely. And I thought, well, 3/4 of the way in, we thought I'd have a fairly straightforward, interesting, but not like too dramatic Spanish Grand Prix. And then a safety car came out, Red Bull strategy was put to one side, Verstappen hit the red mist, and here we are to talk about all that. So yeah, a busy one, but good for plenty of talking points.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's get into the main one. It is, of course, Max Verstappen. We had him brilliantly giving the McLarens a race on a 3-stop strategy against their 2. One of the best saves in a modern Formula 1 car I think I've ever seen, coming onto the start-finish straight. And then, sadly, well, let's get into it. The move on George Russell when Red Bull asked him to give the place back after their clash at the first corner. Phil, do you think that he hit George on purpose?
I mean, it's kind of hard to argue it wasn't. If you just look at the onboard, look at the telemetry, it's pretty clear he slowed down to let George pass and then accelerated again as he came alongside him. So, yeah, it certainly looks that way.
And the fact that he has subsequently apologised for it, we should say he's apologised for it on social media, hasn't he? Immediately after the race, he was in the usual Red Bull Max Verstappen mode of see no evil, hear no evil, all that sort of stuff. But actually, to be fair to him, he has come out and apologised subsequently. So I think we can probably take it that it was deliberate. So Haydn, in that case, do we think the 10-second penalty that dropped him to 10th place was enough, or should he have had something a bit more serious?
Well, before I go into that, I'll just clarify the Verstappen apology. He hasn't actually used the words "I'm sorry."
Well, come on, let's be realistic.
Leading to a move that was not right and shouldn't have happened. Now, yes, that's a show of guilt, you could say, but he's not exactly said, "Sorry for crashing into you, George Russell." But I don't think we're ever going to hear those words from
knowing Max, this is the best you're going to get. Hey,
yeah, so we'll take it as read, but he's not apologise, and this is probably the most of a backward step Max Verstappen could ever do in his life. And so going on to the matter of the penalty, it's an interesting one. At the time, there was lots of split of opinions. I sort of felt it was right at the time looking at it. If it was judged to be deliberate crashing into a competitor, well, that does feel like an instant black flag, and maybe that's the grey matter of it's difficult to prove it, but the telemetry, when looking back at it and going through the data, does sort of seem to only point to that scenario where he backed off, let Russell come alongside, and then accelerated, wasn't making the corner on a normal inside line that he was on at that point, and bangs wheels with Russell. So yeah, I'll be honest, you have to be probably a brave steward to make that call. Let's say in race, especially with sort of 6 laps to go. They did dish out the penalty before the flag, but I think if you're going to black flag him in that period of time, it would have been quite a a bold call. So for me, I think it was the right penalty, but I wouldn't have argued or been that surprised if it was more severe, say 10-second stop and go, which would have been 30 seconds applied post-race, and that would have taken him totally out of the points rather than picking up just the one. Or indeed, of course, disqualification, and that would have been no points.
Yeah, I suppose the precedent is the 2017 Baku race when Sebastian Vettel drove into Lewis Hamilton behind a safety car, and he did get a 10-second stop and go, as well as 3 penalty points. So you could look at that and say, yeah, maybe stop and go would have been the right punishment. But it was a slightly different situation behind the safety car. It's not 1-to-1, but still.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you've got you can't really have red miss moments like that where you lose control when you're at the wheel of a 200-mile-an-hour, 800-kilogram racing car. I would suggest that's pretty serious potential safety hazard. On the other hand, if you go on precedent, we have had quite a few F1 situations over the years, Baku being the most recent one, but if you go back further, Suzuka 1990, 1997, I don't want to get into all that debate, that's a different podcast and video, but they were fairly deliberate incidences that there were no bans for. So on precedent, you'd say probably the penalty was about right, but it is perhaps something that they need to look at. Now, before we get on to Red Bull's part in it, obviously Max Verstappen 1 point away from a ban now, so he's got to behave himself over the next month, Phil. So do you think that that's something that maybe the other front runners, like a George Russell, like an Oscar Piastri, could maybe use to their advantage?
Well, I guess they might try and rile him up some way and goad him into more in more moments like that. But I think Max isn't somebody that just constantly loses his temper either. I mean, he has these moments once in a while. I guess Mexico last year was the other one where he shoved Lando off. So yeah, this is part of who he is as a driver, I guess. But at the same time, until that point, he was actually being pretty patient and realistic in terms of what he could achieve with this car. So he's like, if I can only get third, I'll settle for third. So I think he'll keep his nose clean over the next 2 races. So he's got Austria, first Canada, and then Austria to get through. I think he'll probably be fine.
Yeah, it's probably worth saying it is a slightly different kind of instance, isn't it? We've talked about his driving a lot in terms of where he's deliberately sort of playing with where the line is. Was it fair? Was it unfair? But that was very rational, the way he goes about his business, which you can either agree with or not. This felt very much like all rationale had gone out the window. There was nothing to really be gained from him driving into George Russell, of course. So, but Haydn, do you think that Red Bull have played a part in getting to that point? Because he had lost control at that just briefly, really, but it had been ratcheting up for a little while, hadn't it?
Yeah, massively. I think, it's worth saying we can't excuse Verstappen's actions on his own. He is driving the car, not the team. But the contribution, let's say, of Red Bull's actions or inactions as well, leading to this whole situation certainly didn't help. And that, I think, is, again, a thing that the team is going to look at internally. There should be meetings between the key figures involved at the team to sort of discuss this sort of incident and issue can't continue and can't keep happening. Like you said, in the last 12 months, there's quite a few high profile ones of them involving Verstappen. But yeah, so looking from Red Bull's areas to improve, if you put it in a nice way. I'm probably being hypercritical if I use the strategy as something they could learn from, and Red Bull did sort of say this situation with the 3-stop did leave them exposed to a late safety car, but the chances of a late safety car were incredibly slim, historically looking at Spain, and who would have predicted Antonelli's Mercedes engine would go pop where it did, when it did. So, sure, but going to that 3-stopper, being aggressive, whilst the right thing to do in the race, because it at least gave them a chance to take on McLaren, left Verstappen exposed with no real alternative apart from a fresh set of hard tyres, which is all he had left. He had, I believe, used softs available, but they were the same life as what he was already on, so wouldn't have actually gained fresher rubber on his softer options. The alternative was to, I guess, stay out, which would have given him the lead because he wouldn't have pitted, whereas the McLarens in front of him would have, and he would spend the last 6 laps after the restart defending on older tyres against everyone behind him. And Horner said after the race, probably in that scenario, obviously it's difficult to simulate, they would have lost probably to both McLarens, but maybe he could have held off Verstappen over that period and maybe then still finished 4th, and it wouldn't have been exactly the worst outcome in it, and it would have given Verstappen a fair fight in terms of going for it, whereas the hards just didn't work out. And then I appreciate this is a long answer, but going on to the sort of the pivotal thing that I think hasn't been stressed up too much is, yes, it's that cool. Red Bull have interpreted the rules and said you need to give the position to Russell because you went off track, and they're expecting the FIA stewards to give Verstappen a 10-second penalty for going off track and keeping a lasting advantage. But as the stewards reported after the race, when they did the investigation, they wouldn't have done that. So they would have effectively agreed with Verstappen to be angry to give the place up, and Red Bull misread it. But whilst that is an error, and that is sort of a little bit a thing that Red Bull can argue against in terms of interpretation and racing rules and this, that and the other in the moment, my big sort of gripe of this is the communication to Verstappen, and this is going through Giampiero Lambiase, his race engineer. Now, obviously, they have a wonderful relationship and it's been hugely successful, but the words he was using was sort of just antagonising Verstappen, like in a very grumpy, give the place, I know this isn't right, but do it. And it wasn't a case of sort of trying to soothe him or soften it. It was like, yeah, just get more riled up because this is wrong, but you've got to do it. And okay, you're just, I know Verstappen's personality and character is not exactly going to be calmed by a soothing, dulcet tone, but you're just, red rags to a bull there, and it all contributes to winding them up even more. So, yeah, overall, Red Bull's contribution to Verstappen's red miss moment can't be ignored in this situation.
Yeah, I would. My read of it, Phil, was that the three-stop strategy actually was quite a clever Red Bull way of trying to overcome a car deficit. Effectively, it was that classic thing of, well, let's make the people with the fastest car really have to work for it. And they did ask questions of McLaren, which McLaren were able to answer, but it gave them a chance of winning. So I think the strategy was fair enough. And as Haydn said, you can't know there's going to be a safety car that late. And similarly, they didn't have any other tyres left. But is the call, well, two questions really. The call to get Max to give the place back to Russell, do we think that is a result of the Saudi Arabian situation where they didn't do that and they got a penalty? And do we think that GP's message over the radio was the tone was because maybe there was an internal argument about it at Red Bull? Because I must admit, my read of it was that Russell had forced him off and therefore Verstappen should be able to keep the place and didn't need to give it back. So I was quite surprised when Red Bull asked him to. So how do you think they got to that decision?
First of all, I agree with you. It was absolutely worth trying a three-stop because otherwise they would have just been beaten anyway. And that did leave him exposed. And the safety car also took a lot longer to clear up, mind you. So the hard tyre didn't look as bad a choice when the safety car came out, but it looked a lot worse once they got released finally. Giving the position back, I mean, this is something that teams in the FIA have gone back and forth on. Obviously, the FIA doesn't tell drivers to give that position back anymore after Abu Dhabi 21. So it's now up to the teams and use their judgment. And this is something that, as I understand it, the teams have asked for. So you can't then complain that, it should be clearer from the race direction. But yeah, they would have just looked at precedent and thought like, this is quite risky. Russell's probably going to pass us anyway on these better tyres. So might as well just give the position back, be on the safe side. Because, you're looking at a safety car restarts, everybody's bunched up. A 10-second penalty, as we saw in the end, is hugely damaging. Drops him down to 10th. So it's just way safer to give the position back.
That does make sense, providing your driver is then sufficiently in control to actually just hand the place back. So that's I think probably fair logic. Well, we've probably talked enough about Max Verstappen and Red Bull for now. Let's actually talk about McLaren, who actually did score a 1-2, Oscar Piastri from Lando Norris. I guess the first question really, Phil, I'll go back to you, given you in the paddock, the hype about the flexi wing tests. I, from afar, didn't notice any significant changes to the order. So did that turn out to be a bit of a red herring, do we think?
Yeah, I think so. It was probably overblown by competitors, maybe with some wishful thinking there. Obviously, the media picked it up as well, including ourselves. I think, for I'm sitting, we've been pretty balanced about it. But yeah, I especially Ferrari probably hoped that it would make a big difference. But that TD came out half a year ago, so that's a lot of time to react to it, isn't it? So, at the end of the day, it is a slight balance change, but it's not a massive performance difference. So.
I would say more concerning probably is the driver of the number 4 McLaren, Haydn. So up to this point, you could argue that perhaps Lando Norris has had a pace advantage over Oscar Piastri when he hasn't been making mistakes, and it's been his mistakes that have opened the door to Piastri a few times. But this weekend, it just felt like Piastri was playing faster. He found it in qualifying, in the race, whenever Norris got close. Once he finally did get past Verstappen, he never looked under threat, did he really, Piastri? So are we getting a shift? Is a shift happening within McLaren, or is it a bit too early to say that, do you think?
I think it could be happening. You're right. Piastri did put in a flawless performance, and I think I totally agree. That's why JBL on our Autosport driver ratings gave him a 10 out of 10.
And he never gives anyone 10. He's really stingy.
Yeah, and spoiler to others, there's another 10 out of 10 from this race, but I won't tell you who. You have to go and look at it yourself. But yes, no, you could not fault Piastri's performance all weekend from, practice, qualifying, getting pole by a decent chunk as well. Yes, Norris made mistakes on his final lap and did hold provisional pole, but when it really mattered, Piastri nailed it, and then got the start clean, kept the lead, smooth stints, no half miles, and mastered the late safety car restart too. So you can certainly say it was perfection from Piastri. Norris obviously slipped behind at the start, so lost a bit of time behind Verstappen, and therefore I would presume he would have used a bit of more tyre life in that first stint to get back ahead of Verstappen, as well as running in the dirty air. So I think that can probably explain a little bit of the pace deficit, certainly over that first stint. Norris, I would say he didn't look as downbeat or downcast as he had in previous races. That Monaco performance clearly has given him a big confidence boost, but by his own admission, that's only one race. He feels he needs to show it on a consistent basis to sort of say I'm back. I'm still the big cheese at McLaren, and obviously he has been beaten a week later in Spain. So I would say Piastri has pretty obviously got the upper hand. The points tell you that. The race wins tell you that. But you certainly can't count out Norris just yet. There's still almost 2/3 of the season to go. But he will need to strike back, and Canada, Austria coming up, that he's got to do it now, really, before the gap potentially gets even bigger and then gets into a territory of a race wins worth of points, and then maybe McLaren team orders do come into it.
Yeah, now Phil, you're talking about the dynamics between two teammates. In the end, the final place on the podium went to Charles Leclerc. Should have been Max Verstappen had it run out as a normal race, of course. But Leclerc took his opportunity, didn't he, with the restart. But he was coming from further back. He was actually out-qualified by Lewis Hamilton, only the second time this season for a Grand Prix. But in the race, he was miles faster. So from Ferrari's point of view, is it a bit of a concern that Hamilton's basically in sixth, saying it's his worst race ever? At what point does that go from a problem to a crisis, or is that overstating it because it's just one race?
Yeah, he does tend to be a bit binary with how he perceives races, and Imola, he was obviously energized by having a good result in front of the Italian fans, and here he was giving short shrift to anybody that wanted to ask him about the race, because he was just did not want to be there. Probably the most depressed I've seen him after a race, and he's had a few of those this year. So yeah, it's a concern. I guess the one source of embarrassment is that he started, as you say, ahead of Leclerc. They were on the same strategy, and he was ordered to let him pass on the same tires. So that was not great. It's clearly lacking pace. He said he was lacking grip at the rear through that first stint, and then in the end, of course, Hulkenberg was also helped there. We'll get to that, but. Yeah, being passed by a Sauber just doesn't look great either. So I can definitely understand why he was so upset.
Yeah, well, before we get on to Hulkenberg, I'm going to have one more question for Haydn on the Ferrari side. Was it right that Leclerc didn't get a penalty for his little tete-a-tete with Max Verstappen down the start-finish straight?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, both were able to continue untroubled, not carrying damage from that. It was very much a glancing blow. Neither was trying to do anything like that. I think, they just slightly misjudged it at incredibly high speeds in a pressurized moment. So, I think Leclerc was definitely trying to get back onto the racing line as soon as possible, stay off the the marbles and the rubbered area to make sure that the move stuck going into turn one. But there wasn't a fault from either side to blame. So no further action, no penalty on that one was totally justified.
Yeah, I agree with that. Leclerc was moving a little bit, wasn't he? But Max still actually had space to his left that he could have used as well. We see that quite a lot on straights with drivers that are ahead moving slightly and others having to respond. So I thought no penalty was fair enough. Well, Phil, let's come back to you. You mentioned Nico Hulkenberg. They have absolutely astonishing result, really, for Sauber in fifth. So how did he smash his way to the front? And what was the story of his race? How did he suddenly find himself overtaking Lewis Hamilton in those final laps?
Well, it turns out the key to doing well is by being eliminated in Q1, because then you have all the tyres.
This is the strategy, yeah.
Yes. You have all the tyres available, and he was perfectly happy to have another safety car and bolt on another set of tyres that he used to great effect. So there was a bit of fortune there, finishing sixth and then fifth after Max's penalty. But still, the Saubers were quick. Like, they were there on merit. They were there in the top 10 on merit. And it's a huge relief. I spoke to Jonathan Wheatley, the team boss, afterwards, and they said, just massive relief that we've been able to actually upgrade this car, which hasn't been their strength over the past 18 months, if not longer. So, their upgrades worked. They were genuinely quick. And you look at that tight midfield, it takes, half a tenth. Q1 was absolutely extraordinary. I think Leclerc was sixth, and he was 0.2 off being eliminated. So if you can find that 10th, then suddenly you're in the mix in that midfield. So, this is really important for them because it's no longer about just waiting for 26, but they can actually fight for the rest of the season now in that midfield.
Yeah, I thought it was really in one of those feel-good stories. You always like to see some of the back markers, traditional back markers, getting a few points when the opportunities come along. So, well done to Nico Hulkenberg for taking the opportunity that was there. Well, Haydn, let's look at a slightly sort of bizarre part of the weekend, Aston Martin. So I thought Fernando Alonso looked racy, looked like he meant business in front of his home crowd. He always likes to put on a show, some brilliant overtaking manoeuvres around the outside. Contrast to Lance Stroll not doing the race because of his pain from a 2023 bike crash. So what's going on? Are we going to get Felipe Drugovich in the car for the next one for Canada, or what's happening?
Yeah, the curious case of Lance Stroll continues. I just generally baffled because it sounds like, as the team has revealed a little bit of information, he's been struggling with the pain from a broken right wrist and hand for the last 6 weeks, more than he had been done previously. But obviously this break happened over 2 years ago during his winter prep for pre-season testing for 23. So if you've been suffering with it basically for the last 6 weeks, that includes 4 or 5 races, to then make the decision to now it's too much after qualifying, therefore denying Drugovich or anyone else for that matter the opportunity to step in as a reserve role, given that's what they're paid to do. Drugovich could easily do something else with his time, but he is waiting for this exact moment. And he basically not only denies the team, but denies his teammates the opportunity to pick up points or to impress or just generally to help the team. We don't know, obviously, the details, and we probably won't because it's a private medical matter, but to go through a whole practice, qualifying, and basically the entire triple header and it not be noted as a problem and then suddenly withdraw in the very late hours of Saturday night is quite a strange situation. And the whole thing is odd because he was reported to the stewards for missing the mandatory weigh-in post-qualifying, which all drivers must do as part of the rules. And that's because he had to go to get medical treatment before being weighed, which, again, he would know the rules, know the situation. Didn't get penalised because obviously the car wasn't even entered into the race anyway. But the team were given a warning to let them know. But even that whole situation is quite odd. So yes, Aston Martin enters Spanish Grand Prix with one car. Will it have Stroll in Canada? Well, you've got to say that he's going to do everything in his power to be fit for his home race. Let's not forget. but somebody's going to have to make a decision, and Aston Martin can't really afford to be down to one car or in that situation. Again, given how competitive that midfield fight is. So, yes, the options would be feasibly Dragovic, feasibly Van Dorn, their first choice reserves. Both have Le Mans 24-hour commitments on the same weekend as the Canadian Grand Prix. Such is the masterful situation that Formula One and Le Mans have combined their calendars. Well done, everyone.
Oh, if only Concord was still a thing.
Indeed. Now, Dragovic has said to local media reports that he's willing to basically vacate his Le Mans duties if he can be available for Aston Martin in Canada. Fair play. That just throw everything else at the door for that a reserve slot. But again, it could be down to a contractual matter. That is, if Aston Martin have first rights on Dragovic's services, regardless of his other racing commitments, that could be the issue in there. And same with Van Dorn, he also is going to be racing at Le Mans. So they'd have to figure out which one of those to sort out. Jack Crawford, who is a development driver, he won't be able to race in Canada because he doesn't have a super license yet. The other option that could become available is they could potentially loan Valtteri Bottas as Mercedes reserve driver, given their the end of their engine partnership is currently still involved. So if they wanted, they could go cap in hand to Mercedes and say, please, can we have your Finnish reserve? And they say yes, no. But I think, obviously their first choice will be to get Stroll in his home race back in the car. I'm a hero. I've recovered from my injury. But they have to figure out a plan, and they'll be doing that over the coming days, depending on Stroll's situation. He's due, or probably has already undergone, a procedure on that troublesome wrist, and now it's a case of a race against time to be fit once again for Canada.
Well, let's hope that let's hope he's okay. We should say that about Lance Stroll. I hope he recovers quickly. But quite a few options there. So tune into allsport.com to see what the latest developments are at Aston Martin. But Phil, let's go from one number 2 driver to another. And a return to Red Bull before we finish. Yuki Tsunoda, Max Verstappen came out and sort of defended him, really, didn't he? But again, qualifying at the back, starting from the pit lane, at one point basically getting lapped. How much now is this second car problem on him to sort out and get on top of the car, because obviously it's possible, and how much is it on the team to go, we've got to change the concept of what we're doing?
Well, the history suggests it's both, right? We've seen that Red Bull is extremely difficult to drive, not saying anything new there, but Yuki does shoulder some blame because he destroyed a new floor in his Imola crash, and he's been on the old floor since then. So he's been on spec with Max for all of 3 practice sessions, and now he's behind again. So he's in danger of his season unraveling there and just having to play catch up constantly. But he wasn't as far off Max before this weekend. So this weekend does seem to be extra difficult. I'm not sure he understands exactly what it is. He said afterwards that he wants to try a lot of different things in the simulator to just do this style a little bit better. But this is difficult for Yuki. He's clearly not, he's clearly a good driver. He's shown that in the Racing Bulls. He was really competitive against Lawson and Hadjar. So this is definitely a Red Bull problem, but Yuki hasn't helped it exactly.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Sorry, go on, Haydn.
No, can I just add that I know he'll never admit it, but I wonder if Liam Lawson is actually pleased to be back in the Racing Bulls car. He will say, no, I want to be a Red Bull driver, blah, 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 Helmut Marko, please take me back situation. But it's so clear that the Red Bull problem of, that the car, unless your name is Max Verstappen, is one hell of a handful to drive. And it does look the hardest car to handle on the grid. Whereas contrasting that at Racing Bulls, they seem to have one of the most user-friendly cars. Look at what Hadjar's able to do as a rookie. Look at what, Lawson is getting back up to speed, but he had no pre-season testing because obviously he was at Red Bull. He is starting to get there with that car. And conversely, look at Tsunoda's form and pace and where that sort of disappeared whilst he was putting in very good performances in that user-friendly Racing Bulls. It just is baffling situation all round, and is now Tsunoda going to be the one that is burnt the most by the Red Bull situation because he's sort of been put in as the last hope? Or do they stick with it because they know, okay, Yuki's doing his best, but it's not his fault predominantly that this isn't working?
Yeah, and Hadjar is now doing so well that he might have to start sandbagging to avoid in-season promotion.
Yeah, he just turn his phone off whenever Marco calls, and that's fine. Yeah, no, I'm happy here. Please fix your car before I'm going to be promoted and put under the coals.
Yeah, well, joking aside, let's hope they do sort it out, not just for Yuki Tsunoda, just from a neutral fan point of view. When you've got in theory, a competitive car that isn't up at the front, you're losing out on a potential multi-car battle, aren't you, for the top places? So let's hope they do get on top of it at some point soon. Well, thank you very much to Haydn, Cobb and Filip, Cleeren. Thank you very much for tuning in. That's just about it for our Spanish Grand Prix review. We'll be back next week with a full preview of the Canadian Grand Prix, and also keep your eyes peeled for our Le Mans 2025 preview. That'll be coming soon as well. Until then, thanks for watching.